Hello, everybody. Matt Stevens here. I hope you're all doing well. My next guest on the We Love Cycling video podcast is a lad that I think you'll be very fond of. He's called James Shaw. He rides for EF Education, EasyPost. And this year, he rode his second Grand Tour, but he rode his first Tour de France, getting 2 top 10 places. And what's special about James, aside from being a lovely lad, is that he's had a really unusual trajectory to get to the point where he is today. And his story is one that is truly inspirational. Hope you enjoy it. James Shaw, thank you very much indeed, mate. I think for joining us on the We Love Cycling podcast. For anybody that doesn't know where you are, which is most people watching this, I know where you are. You're just up the road in real life. But whereabouts are you?
So I'm just on the edge of the Derbyshire Peak District, just sort of the southeast corner. Pretty much where I've grown up, where I grew up, albeit then I obviously spent a stint living in Belgium racing there and a stint living in Spain and stuff, but always found myself coming back home. And yeah, it turns out we're only just up the road.
Indeed, yeah. I don't think I've ever done a podcast. I've maybe done one where somebody's literally up the road. I was thinking I should have really arranged to go out on my bike with you, but you'd have probably just dropped me straight away, to be perfectly honest with you. Is it just an easy spin because you've been in Italy this weekend, haven't you?
Yes, I flew back yesterday, so I'm going to try and get a good couple of days in because then I've got to Paris Tours at the end of this week. And then I probably won't be home for too long before I fly to Japan. I'll probably only be home for a couple of days. So I'm going to do Japan Cup, and then we're finished. But mudguards went on the bike yesterday. The mudguards have gone on now because it's deepest, darkest winter now, isn't it? So
it's a little bit. It's that time of year when the roads, especially in Britain, they don't really dry up. Even when it's not rain, they're always sticky and damp, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So the mudguards are on, and that's it now. I'm ready for winter.
Good stuff, mate. Well, you've had to use a footballing analogy, a season of two halves, really, haven't you? You had a cracking year. You've ridden your second Grand Tour, but you rode the Tour de France, and we obviously bumped into each other on a couple of occasions. Wish it could have been a bit more, but you know what the Tour's like. It's a bit mad, isn't it? It's insane. But because I want to talk a little bit about your journey to this point, because it's been quite unusual in this sort of the amounts of peaks and troughs and stuff. But should we start there? Because for anybody that doesn't know you, you're an outstanding under 23, turned pro with Lotto Soudal, didn't you? As was. And just give us a little bit of a flavour about your journey to the point you are now. For anybody that doesn't really know you.
So yeah, I had a good time as a junior racing in the UK, and I was one of the lads that did those John Barclay trips. If anyone don't know Barclay, go and just Google John Barclay cyclist or something like that, and comes up. There's a good story about him. But the long story short is he basically started taking young lads out to Belgium to race on the continent just to give them a flavour. And I think he started doing this when he was sort of a lot younger. But by the time I was going out with him, he'd drive and he was way into his 80s. So as a junior, I was doing that. I was going out to Belgium every few weekends a year, and we'd do a bit of racing, and got into a few races, and I was quite successful at the junior Kerner Brussels Kerner, and I think that sparked a bit of interest with the guy who at the time ran the Lotto. I think it was called Bellasol at the time. He ran the Lotto Bellasol under 23 team, and then the year I joined, it became Lotto Soudal. So I went there in my first year in 2015, I think was my first year. And then I did 2 years with the under 23 team and thought it was brilliant. I loved it. I loved the racing. The team had such a diverse calendar. Could do the Cobble Classics 1 minute, and then you could do the mountains of Italy or France the next or whatever. Got a real diverse calendar. Loved life. Thought it was brilliant. Went back for my second year. Had a cracking year. Did well in races like Tour of Normandy or whatever. And towards the end of the year, they offered me what they call like a stagiaire contract. So like, don't know how to explain that to people. You ride for the pro team but you're not actually sort of like a paid rider, are you?
It's
You sort
almost
of,
like a mini trial apprenticeship, isn't it? It's like to
yeah,
see how you integrate yourself within the team, importantly, as well as
yeah,
riding the bike. It's like an opportunity to get a look at you before they seal the deal, isn't it? Really?
yeah. I don't know what the direct translation from stagiaire into English is, but I imagine it's probably like trainee, isn't it, or
Yes.
apprentice or something
Yeah.
like that. Is it a
Yeah.
rough translation? And so I did that. I got this stagiaire contract for the last 3 months of the 2016 season, and rode my first tour of Britain with this stuff like this. And I think was that the year the Worlds also finished in the Worlds were in Qatar. That might have been the same year. Yeah, I think it was the year the Worlds Sagan won the Worlds in Qatar. I think
Cav
was
was
the same
second.
year.
Yes, right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Cav was second, and I think Blythe was top 10 as well, wasn't he? There's some
Just
good.
outside. You think he was 11th actually? Just yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's scoring at that level.
Yeah.
So I then had my first year professional with Lotto. Was 17, loved it, got on really well. Did my second year in 18 with them again. Um, didn't quite go as I'd maybe hoped. I got a little bit ill halfway through the year with sort of like a bit like anemia kind of thing, sort of
Yeah.
low iron, just run down. By the middle of the season, I was starting to struggle. But I managed to pick it up a little bit towards the end. Started getting real good results. I was 10th at the Worlds in Innsbruck at the end of 18. And like you look at the 9 guys in front of me as well, you think it was incredible.
Yeah.
That every one of them's gone on to win stages of Grand Tours or win Grand Tours or whatever. That was a real, quite elite year. I was quite proud of that. And then I went and raced Lombardia and broke my collarbone right at the end of 18. And that's sort of then when things started going a bit pear shaped. So it was the same year CCC and BMC merged. They became
Yes.
one team, and it was the year Aqua Blue stopped.
Yeah.
So it put like 50, 60 riders on the market. My contract was also up for renewal. I didn't get the renewal with Lotto. And at the time, I was a bit like, I didn't really know what to do. I had an agent at the time who was, I don't know, it felt like he wasn't doing anything. Evidently, he wasn't doing anything. Nothing came of
Right.
it. And I ended up falling back onto the British continental scene as my plan B as a backup with a team called SwiftCarbon. And although I got good results there in Yorkshire and Tour of Britain and the like, um, that I think was the most difficult year of
Yeah.
my career that I've ever experienced. That I so many things I just couldn't get on with. There was things like got contract to X amount. It wasn't even that much money. I think I went there for like 14 grand or something like that. I literally
Right.
signed for peanuts, and they never paid any of it. Never paid a penny of it. So it all just seemed to fall apart, and I'd gone from in 12 months, gone from riding on the world tour stage, getting top tens at world championships, to sort of being in this sort of a lot sort of smaller continental team where I wasn't even getting the money I was contracted to, let alone
Quite
enough to live off, sort of
quite
thing.
hard mentally, isn't it? I mean, that was part of your one of the big questions I was going to ask you was when you look back and then you went to you ultimately got up to the next. Was it pro Conti with Riwal or were they Continental the next team
They
for
were
the
pro
following year?
Conti, so it was Russ Downing that pretty much sorted that out. So the team previously had varying different names called Cult or varying things. But Russ managed to put me in touch with the team manager, who is now my agent, who I am really well with, was a guy called Michael Skelder. I think he might be your sort of era. I think he might be your
Yes,
sort of
yeah,
time,
yeah.
Skelder.
Well, Ross Downing,
Um,
for anybody who doesn't know, is a good lad, friend of both of ours, and a former British champion. Rode for Team Sky, and pretty well connected, isn't he? And rode for that
yeah,
an iteration of that team. Yeah,
yeah, and he's all around good egg, and he's always done things to help me as much as he can. Like, if I've ever been in trouble or whatever, pick up the phone and he's always on the other end, kind of thing. So, it was Russ that pretty much sorted that deal out. Rang Skelder and said, oh, can this lad come to your team, sort of thing. And Skelder was brilliant. He was very much like, yeah, we'll have you. This is the contract. This is what we're offering. No willy nilly. So then I left Swift at the end of 19, went to Riwal 2020. And at that point, at the end of 18, the end of 19, the point of like the concept of retirement seemed quite appealing. I sort of got to the point
Right.
where I was like, oh, I've given it a good bash, but it's not quite happened. I came back and tried to give it another bash. And again, I mentally struggled and I didn't really enjoy the year of 2019. And luckily, there was another guy on the team called Stephen Bradbury, who's now one of my best mates. And I don't think I really got through the year if he hadn't been on the team as well.
Right.
To find somebody that was in a very similar position, who had very similar sort of upbringing, we understood each other very well. We sort of bounced off each other a little bit. I think he struggled as well with a lot of the things that were sort of the general disorganisation and the lack of finances and the lack of everything at Swift seemed to tax both of us quite well. And then I went to Riwal 2020. Things looked great. I was like, oh, brilliant. I'll stay here a few more years. There was a rumor that the tour was then going to start in Denmark. This was Denmark's only professional team. I was thinking, brilliant. This is mega. I'm going to stay here a few years and then maybe I'll step up again. I'll ride for myself because it's a smaller team. Skelder was really helpful. He's, giving me the program I wanted. We were in Amstel Gold Race. We were in all these big races and it looked like we were going to, I thought that's it. I can put all the past behind me. Let's go. And then we had a global pandemic, didn't we, in 2020? And lo and behold, that bankrupted the team. That the COVID virus pretty much bankrupted the team. There was one of the sponsors, I think it was Readiness. I can't remember what they did. No, I can't remember. But they basically went under because of the pandemic, and they couldn't afford to sponsor us. Securitas stepped in halfway through the year to try and help, but they couldn't financially make up what Readiness had lost, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So basically we got to June, and the manager said to us, "Look, guys, we've got this amount of money left. We can either pay you all for the rest of the year, and you can't race, or we pay for you to go to races, but we can't afford to pay anyone. What do you want to do?"
I think I remember back then, actually, we communicated on Twitter because you were asking if you got any other, because you were at that point, I think you just bounced a few ideas around or said I could put some feelers out for you, because I think you did decide ultimately, without cutting across you, to keep on riding without getting paid, to keep yourself in the shop window, because as a professional cyclist, if you get paid but don't race, what's the point? That's it. You're not going to be seen doing what you do best.
Yeah, I think the hard thing that made, obviously, when a team folds in that situation, nobody retired that year because everyone thought it was a crap year to retire on. So everyone had renewed contract. Nobody really left teams because nobody had raced to sort of get a result to prove themselves. There's very little racing actually happened. And a lot of teams just renewed their rosters from 2020 through to 2021. So no teams were actually taking riders. So if you were on a team that stopped, it was like, well, what do you do? So again, fell back to British Conti level, which was when I went to Riwal.
So far you've gone World Tour, Continental, Pro Continental, back to Continental. So that's the graph so far, isn't it, in terms of divisions?
Yeah. Pro amateur, pro amateur. Yeah, pro amateur, pro amateur now.
Yes,
2021 was Riwal, which was I look back now and I really enjoyed the concept of the year. I didn't actually race that much, but the races I did do, I sort of really got the opportunity to concentrate on. And I went there. I knew Col Sturgis before I went there. Col isn't it? It's only about an hour south from here, in Leicester. So I'd sort of grown up. I grew up riding around here as a kid. Sort of always came across Col. I always knew who he was, and so we were fairly well acquainted by the time I got there. It was like sort of riding with an old mate sort of thing. So he was DS in the team as I was riding, and we just had a laugh. We just had a good year, and we did Slovenia, Norway, Tour of Britain, and the sort of things. things were sort of started to go well. I'd picked up a few results. At this time, I was self-representing. I didn't have an agent. I was representing myself at this point, and somehow can't really remember how. I think Matt Bramia maybe gave me Charlie Wegelius's number, and I rang Charlie because
Charlie Regalis, one of the DSs at EF. Yep.
he's the head DS at EF. He decides who does what races. But I rang him more on like the premise of like just to ask him questions. I was like, oh, well, when you're looking for a rider, do you think they need an agent, or is it set in stone that you won't talk to anyone without? Some people were like, you need an agent. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't have an agent. And then some people were like, oh no, like if you represent yourself, they think better of you. So I rang Charlie and sort of just said like, what do you think? And he basically said, oh, this, that, yeah, we take some riders with agents, some riders without. And he said something like, for example, we're looking for a rider of this sort of ability, or this sort of, and I sort of said, well, could I send my CV and like, could I sort of like send it now, sort of thing? And he sort of like went sort of quiet on the phone for a second, and he was like, oh yeah, all right then, all right, yeah, send it in. So then it was like, all right, yeah, that worked quite well. And then I think I had another call with him. And he said, oh, yeah, things look good, power looks. I sent them like a bit of data and all this kind of stuff like you do. And he said, all right, yeah. And then this was about at the start of July. And then he said, all right, I'll have a word with JV and JV will call you at some point. And it was the second rest day. And JV called me and I got this phone call from this number and I was packing myself. I was like, oh, what am I going to say?
Yeah.
And when he said you're gonna JV will call you, I ordered JV's book on Amazon. I thought I better read this. Like I better sort of
Swatting up for the interview, almost like an interview. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And there was so many questions. The book didn't arrive until after I'd spoken to him, but half the questions he asked me made so much sense once I'd read his book. There's some things I'm like, all right, that makes a lot more sense. There's one question he asked me about dogs. And he was like, do you prefer this dog or this dog? And I was like, sort of question is that? Like, what sort of an interview is this?
Cryptic, isn't it? Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. I said one of them, and he was like, "Oh no, I don't like them." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's it. Then I've failed." And then, but when I read his book and I realized what dog he had when he grew up as a kid, I sort of realized why he'd asked about these two dogs. And it sort of made a lot more sense. At the time, I just remember thinking, "Why are we talking about dogs? What are we talking about dogs for?" And yeah, so I think that was a really good conversation. And then I think it was. So maybe that was the first rest day of the tour. Second rest day of the tour, I was out on my bike and I was out in the peaks, just minding my business sort of thing. I stopped. It was a hot day. I remember being a hot day, and I stopped to fill my water bottles up with water from the cafe or
Yeah.
whatever. I stopped somewhere. I thought I'll check my phone while I'm here, and that was it. He just sent me a text message saying, "Yeah, we'll have you. This is the offer.
Blimey.
This is the length," sort of thing, and that was it. All the details of it. And it was like. And then it sort of finished with like, can you let me know by the end of the week or something? I remember standing there in the corner of this cafe on this road in the middle of the peaks thinking, oh, I'm not going to say no, am I? So I sort of just messaged him back there and then
Straight away.
said, yeah, send me the details. Let's do it. Like I wasn't going to like make him wait for the week. I was like, well, I ain't got anything else to do, have I?
So basically, you'd gone,
hanging on.
yeah. So from 2018 back to down, and yeah, it's quite an amazing journey, isn't it? And you're still only when I had to check your age, mate. You're still only 27. You're still a young man, and this is year 2 at EF, and it's been I wouldn't even call it a breakthrough year, but maybe in terms of your career, it has been because you got picked for the Tour de France. You had a great start to the season, and then it kind of ebbed a little bit, and you had a brilliant Dauphiné. If we just can fast track this year a little bit, because you weren't down to do the tour originally, were you? So to end up riding the tour and in the manner that you did was, I mean, it's astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, so it was quite a weird change. Like I said, I had a good start to the year. Had a couple of crashes, things that didn't really, and then when I went to the classics, I wasn't in the shape that I wanted. I'd hit my knee earlier in the year in Italy, and I wasn't quite in the shape I was. And then when I got there, I found myself like sort of not really like I was trying to accelerate and not getting anywhere. So I was feeling a bit rough. So I didn't ride Liège, and I came home. I did a COVID test. It turned out I tested positive for COVID. So then I got COVID again. So then it was like right after the classics was forced break, which I wasn't too worried about. I always tend to get to the classics and have a week sort of chilling out before hitting hard again. And so I chilled out, went on team. Then we did a team altitude camp, which was the tour prep camp. But I wasn't doing any of the races, so I was like, "Well, can I go on the camp anyway?" And they were like, "Yeah, you know." Like I said, I'll prepare for Dauphiné and then nationals, and then have another break. Had a really good Dauphiné. And last day of Dauphiné, or the Saturday of Dauphiné, Charlie rang and said, "How about going on the long list for the tour?" And I was like, "Really? You sure you rang the right person? Do you mean to ring me?" Sort of thing. He said, "Yeah." So then we went on the long list, and then I didn't know whether the long list was like because you've been put on it late. Does that mean you go in, or is it just a long list?
How long is the long list? Do you know how long the long list is? Is it like 12?
I think it starts in January at about 12, and by Dauphiné it gets to about 10.
Right.
So by the fact that it got to 10 and then I'd been added to it, I didn't know if that meant it was a good thing or if it was just, that's a long. I didn't know what to think of it. All Charlie said was, prepare as if you're going to go, So in my head, that was, see what happens. And I think I was packing the van and I was just about to leave for the nationals.
So this is 1 week before the Tour de France, isn't it? It's still because that's
this is a
generally when
week
all the
before
selections are made, isn't it? Just after the nationals is when the team's announced, isn't it? Generally.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think teams like Jumbo they know a lot, a bit in advance, and Ineos maybe, but I think there are guys on the team. I think Carapaz knew a fair way out that he was going to go, and Esteban and Rigo and stuff. But I think maybe people don't realize that when you get to the last few spaces on the team, there's always like maybe 3 guys fighting for 2 spaces, something like that, and there's 3 guys, 4 guys maybe have the ability, but maybe I don't know, one had a crash here, one had a crash there, something hasn't quite gone too well, or one had an illness, something's not quite worked. And I was just leaving, and I'd missed Charlie's first call, and then it was the second call he picked up, and he said, "Oh, are you busy?" I said, "I'm just packing the van. I'm just off to Saltburn, wasn't it? Saltburn was the championship." Yeah. And I said, "I'm just about to head up to Saltburn," and he says, "Oh, okay, well, best of luck, but yeah, don't crash. Stay ill, stay healthy, because barring disaster, we'll take you to the start of the tour in the Basque Country."
Blimey.
Bloody hell, So I remember putting the phone down. I rang my dad straight away. I think he was at work. I was like, hey, he was like, hi. And then when I ring my dad, if I ring him at work, he thinks like something's gone horribly wrong. He's like, "Oh, who's died? Have you crashed?" He thinks something's. I never ring him at work because I tend to leave him alone. I was like, "Oh, just can you look after my dogs? Because I've got to go to France for the whole of July." And I don't think he was like, "Oh yeah, like what you go?" And then his penny dropped. He's like, "Oh yeah, the Tour of July." And that was it then. So after that, it was like, but from the point where Charlie said, "Prepare as if you're going to go," I'd put my blinkers on. Then I was so focused on if I was going to go that I wanted to be as good as I could be.
Yeah.
And that was it. Then that was sort of the start of the journey.
I want to talk a little bit about the tour. And you had, unfortunately, you crashed out in stage 14. But you had 2, was it stage 14, stage 15? But you had a couple of big top 10s. But before we get to that point, given your career so far and the time that you were in the World Tour, you rode through the COVID, the COVID years, for want of a better phrase, and came out the other side, back riding at the elite level. What's the biggest change in the sport for you? Because this is something I do ask pretty much everybody that I speak to, because I'm fascinated to hear the different answers from riders at different stages of their career, and for slightly older riders deep into their 30s, for example. Spoke to Rowan Dennis on this podcast and saying that racing's just so hard. I mean, he's a classy rider, but he's saying one of the reasons that he wanted to retire was that he's given his all, but there's no more. He can't really go any further because the racing is so dynamic, so hard, and the toll the psychological, the physiological toll is really, really high. But what
Yeah.
about that for you? Because you're riding at the highest level. You know, you've now ridden your first Grand Tour, and you are riding with this generation. You're mixing it with the guys that are shaping the landscape of our sport. So what have you noticed to be the biggest change?
I think so. I think when I first turned professional, in 17, that was the very, very last few years of what I would consider like almost old school cycling, and it's in the sense that people would still have a pint at the end of the halfway through a stage race at the end of a race sort of thing, and or people, you know, and in the sense that it was like um the breakaway would go and it was small teams and they were just going for television time.
Yeah,
It wasn't now. Everyone thinks the break's going to the finish. The break will go, and you used to you'd let a break of 4 on a 200 plus k day. You'd let them go for 6 7 minutes. You'd let them take the mick, but you know what I mean.
yeah, yeah.
Now you don't let them go for 7 8 minutes. You let 4 guys go and you hold them at 4 minutes, or you let them have the stage, and almost that's
Yeah.
decided at the start. Now it's they think they're going for the stage win, so they go into the break, and everyone's on fast tires, and everyone's on low pressures, and everyone's on tubeless, and everyone's on an aero bike, and everyone's got an aero helmet, and everyone's in a suit. When I was first professional, you still wore a shorts and jersey because it was cool. Like you still wore
Yeah.
cotton socks. No, you don't. How many people wear cotton socks? Now, if you wear cotton socks, you're going for a training round. You're not.
Yeah.
It's like you're not taking it seriously. Um, but the whole sport is like you say, it has developed. It's become so much more aggressive, and I think with things that training's so much better than it was, nutrition so much better than it was, recovery. Everyone's got these compression inflatable leg things or this cold compress things. So when you're sitting on the bus, you can recover better and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we still do old school things, don't we? Like you'd have thought by now we'd have thought of a better solution than safety pins for pinning on numbers, wouldn't you? Surely we can.
They're not
Surely
not
everybody can.
they're not very aero,
Surely,
are they? Let's be honest.
no. Surely everyone can have a number at the beginning of the year and it gets printed on your kit, and then you're just that
Yes,
number for the whole year. Like football,
makes sense.
you don't have a new number every match, do you? Like
No,
you have to pin your number on the back of your football shirt. You have that number for the whole season. So why can't we do that? But we still use safety pins like Eddie did. So we still like there's still things that like are like old school, but the sport has like evolved and developed so much in the past. Certainly in the past, what about 7 years I've been racing, and like I said, I think because all these different factors have gone up, and maybe that started with Sky and EOS, is with this sort of marginal gains thing, you know. But it's got to the point now where I don't think we'll in the future. I don't think we'll see many people go into their late 30s, early 40s, like we saw with Jens Boy and Valverde. And I think maybe somebody that might do it might be Ben Swift.
right, okay,
He's 37.
yeah, he is now, isn't he? Well, Geraint, like Geraint's
Yeah,
going to do another year,
yeah,
isn't he? Geraint Thomas, yeah,
yeah. So I think that they're the last guys that we'll see go to nearly 40. I think we'll see the retirement age come right down to early 30s,
yeah,
33, 34 max, because of things like Rowan was saying, like that mentally taxing fatigue of if you're not going on these high altitude camps, and if you're not doing this extreme, not necessarily extreme nutrition, but dedicated in terms of extreme, like
well, the thing is,
real.
if you want to be one of the best, you have to be at the very cutting edge, and that takes
Yeah,
sacrifice, doesn't it? Whatever that sacrifice might look like, whether it's another couple of months per season away from your family outside of racing at these camps. That if you don't do the camps, you're not going to be in the shape to get a contract for the following year. So, and it's like, well, how long can you sustain that amount of sacrifice? Because the sport, I guess, you've got all this open source information now, and
yeah.
even lads riding it and women riding at the lower levels, they're very good cyclists. The
Oh,
depth now is incredible, isn't it?
yeah. The like I think as well that's because like coaching's evolved that you don't. Even when I first turned professional, it was like you had to do above 70 days a year, at least above 70 days a year, and that was like, oh, if you've done that many, then then you'll have a better season next year. And you've got to do a grand tour because then that'll prepare you for the next year and things like that. Where I think we're going to see less of that now, and I think we're going to see more targeted stuff. A bit like what sort of Jumbo do with Vingegaard is sort of Pogacar did all these classics, didn't he? And he did Flanders, and he was kicking ass of these guys, and everyone was like, "Whoa, this guy's going to win everything." And then got to the Tour, and maybe the last week he probably wasn't as fresh as maybe he could have been. I think we'll see a lot more like particular structure and target races. Then people will be like, "Right, I'm going to go on altitude camp. I'm going to do this. I'm going to miss that race for this." It's like, "Oh, well, I won't. That's not a preparation race because I can go to altitude or, whatever." I think the next thing we'll learn is how much crashing takes out of your body, is how much the energy is poured into like healing as opposed to like, I think that people might even get to a point where it's like, I'm not going to do that race in case I risk crashing because it'll set me back for such and such and such and such or whatever. But yeah, so I think Rowan pretty much hit the nail on the head in the sense that it's evolving so fast and so strong. And like you say, all these young lads and everyone knows about the tire pressures and fast this and fast that and wax chain and etc. That it's just brought the sport to a new level. That it's so much more aggressive and it's so much faster. And because we can train and recover faster, we can go harder and more aggressive for longer. And it is shaping a new way of cycling. And I still like the idea of, having like a standard bike on sort of like, I don't like the idea of having like these maybe funny monocoque frames or anything like that. I still like the idea of a bike looking like a bike. But at the same time, I think, with the industry pushing things like disc brakes, aero bikes, and aero handlebars and aero helmets and stuff, it is evolving to be way faster. I don't think there's any debate. It's as fast as it's ever been.
It is. Well, just looking at the average speeds as well. Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculously entertaining. It makes my job job weirdly more enjoyable because there's so much going on, but it's harder because I can't predict. I'm not that I'd always predict, but sometimes, you watch a bike race and you get a sense of most likely what's going to unfold, and you could probably pick after three-quarters of the race maybe 3 or 4 winners. But now although you've still got this top tier, you've got these 5 riders right at the very top, and we know who they are. The racing is still very unpredictable to get to that point, isn't it? It's massively.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying this? So I didn't even ask you that. You must be, because what's it like to be in amongst it? And like you were in amongst it in the Tour stage when you were 5th when Tadej Pogacar clipped off the front, come past you. You were one of the remaining members of the breakaway that day when he first started to take a little bit of time back from Jonas and put 25 seconds into him.
Yeah.
And what was that like when those guys started to come by you and you're there in amongst it, and it's like, oh, James is getting stuck in? That must have been bonkers for you.
It was a bit. Yeah. I mean, the first thing I think I realized at the Tour was it doesn't matter what race you've been to before, what you've seen before, whatever's happened. The Tour is all right. The racing's a little bit quicker. There's nobody's in bad shape at the Tour. Occasionally guys can maybe be at a race and it's like, they've got sick or whatever. Nobody's in bad shape at the Tour. It's the fastest race in the world. But the level of organisation and the level of atmosphere around it's just through the roof. Like everything's turned up to 11 in that aspect. Every media, this and everything's just so much more elevated. The fact that they have all these helicopters flying over. I remember one day we'd got I think we got 2 TV helicopters overhead, and then the 3 Skoda ones, and then 3 blacked out armed helicopters come flying over. All these helicopters flying all over the place. And then Macron was at the finish, so I presume the 3 blacked out helicopters, he was in one of them, and they'd flown him over to watch the race, and he got to the finish, which I think was the day that won on that. Was it stage 5?
I think it was that stage, because obviously I was there. I was at the finish, and I saw Macron. Yeah, he walked straight past us and stuff, and we weren't allowed to shake hands with him. But I do remember. And it was like being in a war film where they all took off and then went.
It was like Apocalypse Now, wasn't it? Or that scene when they were Forrest Gump, when they're walking into Vietnam and the helicopters, and they play All Along the Watchtower by Hendrix, and the helicopter comes flying in. It was so weird. And even like things I didn't realize as well was, I remember being in like biggish cities with a lot of people, and like your phone data or your phone signal wouldn't work and everything like that. And I'm like, is this just because there's too many people here, or have they turned it? Have they turned everyone's down for us from a security point of view? I couldn't work out if they'd, and if they're
It's
going to that
basically, I
level of
think it's like
security.
being at a music festival. Basically, your
Mm,
phone. I mean, we're all the same. Getting and actually sending our pictures back for Eurosport was quite hard sometimes because we use data
yeah,
packs. So quite often it's just there's so many people at these finishes and the starts, more the finishes, that
yeah.
the data's just there's hardly any data left for anybody. So yeah, that's one of the reasons.
It's yeah, and this is there's I because then as well when we did the Grand Columbia stage, we finished at the top.
Yeah,
That was
blimey.
a really good day. I think that was for me that was one of those days where on paper you'd go right, that's the breakaway, that's the GC riders are going to battle it out for the stage win. But Kwiatkowski stayed away and won, and we got caught 250 meters to go. And I think on paper that was not really a race I'd have said the breakaway had much chance of going or staying. But now when you look at it and you think, oh, actually, nobody really knew what was happening because the sport's evolved in that sense that
That's it. You're
that
speaking every
you
day. I
can't
was
predict
speaking.
anything.
No, every day you're speaking to. I was in my job there speaking to riders, direct sportives, and a lot of people are just shaking their head. Like that
Yeah,
looked like it was a classic day for the break to stay clear or not, but it got well. Ultimately,
exactly.
Quieto did, and all that's definitely going to be a GC day, and it isn't. It's really hard because so many DSs are trying to formulate a plan to continually anticipate.
Yeah,
Everybody's trying to anticipate, so all the old rules get turn up, and you end up with this new form of racing, which is far more
exactly.
fluid and unpredictable.
Yeah,
So the old rules, albeit loose rules, that we'd think a race would evolve. Transition stage, GC stage, break
yeah,
stage, sprint stage. That's kind of gone. Even sprint stages
yeah,
now. Well, we've had breaks stay clear. But so on that the Grand Colombier stage, that was so hard that climb, mate, wasn't it? Because you're in
yeah,
the break with Quieto. He let's be honest, he paced it perfectly, didn't he? Drop
yeah,
back, then come
yeah.
past you guys, but then
He knew exactly what
Pogacar,
he's doing.
Pogacar and Jonas coming by you in the finishing straight. What was that like?
Yeah, that was demoralizing. Yeah, that was what amazed me. I mean, I know maybe we had obviously ridden to get to the bottom of the climb where maybe they'd sat in the wheels. But how much time they took out of us in the 17K of the
Yeah.
climb. I think we had 3 minute 50, 4 minutes in hand. And I was thinking, crikey, they went up 4 minutes quicker. That's ridiculous, isn't it? It's like with the sport evolving, I think I pushed just over 6 watt a kilo, and lost 4 minutes.
So 6 watts of blimey, that's a stat right there, isn't it?
Yeah, that's how far the sport's come in six. The six isn't enough anymore. You used to win the tour on that sort of watch, then you 7 is the new six now. You
Yeah,
have to put
6.5 to 7 is now. I mean, 7 for Jonas and Tador was 6.5 to 7 is that new spot, isn't it? Where
yeah. We go back. I don't know when Brad. I don't know what Brad did when he won the tour, but I imagine 6 to 6.5 would have had you somewhere there or thereabouts, wouldn't it? Where now you need nearly a full, you need a half to a watt more per kilo. You think you weigh 60 kilos. You need a lot more watts. It's
but
ridiculous.
thing is, you had two top tens in that Tour de France. It was unexpected that you went. You clearly had just looking at the way your face lights up, mate, when you're talking about your experiences of the tour. That
Yeah.
just shows how special the tour is, isn't it? You take yourself back, and we probably haven't got the time to talk too much longer. You've got to get out on your bike, but. What's things looking like for? Are you allowed to talk about next year yet, or do you know what's happening yet? Without
I mean, I know what's happening.
right, is it
Hasn't
good?
been.
Is it a
It
thumbs
is
up?
good. It is good. I'm
That's what.
happy. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Strangely, it was all sorted pre the tour. It was sort of months ago. I don't know why it's not been announced. I don't know. I'm probably keeping it a secret. I don't actually need to be. But it's not been officially announced yet. But it all looks, yeah, no, it all looks rosy and all looks bright. So I'm pleased with the direction of things are going. But I think for me, the biggest thing I mean, I learned a lot about concussion this year, but I learned a lot about myself and a lot about if you'd have asked me if we'd have done this a year ago, and you'd have said, "What's your dream?" I'd have probably said to myself, "The dream is to win a stage of the Tour de France." But I don't think I'd ever have had the confidence to tell other people that and to be
Sure.
like, "That's my future. That's my that now is my one career aim." Where now I learned so much this year, so much about myself, so much about where I've been, where I've come from, where I want to go. Before, I don't think I really knew where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to win races, but I probably would have settled for, oh, I just want to be the best bike rider I can be if I can make a good living and I can retire and have paid off my house, this kind of stuff. Where now I'm like, I've got a really clear aim now, and I think if I can win a stage of the Tour at one point in my career, that now is my aim. And having been reasonably close, I don't think it's that a dafter thing to say now. Where a year ago I'd have been like,
Yeah.
little James, don't say things like that. That's
But
for
but
other
it's a
people.
really interesting point. That self analysis is massively important, and the reason I wanted to firstly speak to you is because I wanted to speak to you for a long time. Secondly, we need to go out on a bike ride soon when you're tapering. Obviously, just an easy day. Let's put it that way. But it is because your career has been very unusual to do amateur pro, amateur pro, amateur pro, and now you're riding the Tour. That amount of setbacks that you've had, and that's not being disrespectful to SwiftCarbon or Riwal, but
No,
in the
no.
grand scheme of things, they are setbacks, and a lot of people are just thrown in the towel. But the fact that you're here, you've persevered, just shows
Yeah,
that you are mentally very, very strong, and you believe in yourself. And now there's believing in yourself, and then there's backing yourself, and you've gone beyond believing in yourself. It's like, right now, I back myself. I'm in one of the biggest teams in the world. I've been on the biggest stage within spitting difference distance of a win. And now it's this time for you to kind of have that focus because all that platform is there. You've experienced the highs and lows, and that's only made you stronger. I think, James, I really do.
yeah. I think you maybe you go through your career and you sort of maybe you get a bit lost. It's easy to sort of get caught up in a lot of things or sort of not take it for granted because I don't think nobody's got to the world tour on sort of coincidence. You don't sort of
No.
trip and end up in the world tour. Everybody's earned their place, but I certainly look back at things and places I've been, and I'm like, I think I'm maybe a bit more grateful for the opportunities I've had. And I think if I'd have come to a team like EF in the first place, maybe things would have gone a bit more straight lined, a bit more swimmingly. Maybe I have taken the slightly less the road less travelled as it was, the slightly rougher road and things. And people say I wouldn't say I regret anything. There's things I'd do differently. I don't think there's things I necessarily regret about the journey. But yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, how I don't know if it was more stubbornness or willpower or maybe just sheer out and out stupidity that maybe kept me going. And a lot of the time, I think in my head because when you retire from sport, you have to inform WADA and UKAD that you no longer want to be in a testing pool. You're going to retire. And that you don't want to do your whereabouts because they
Yeah.
can come and obviously we have to do this so that we can be. But it's ever so funny because the year I left Lotto and went to Swift, and the year I left Riwal and went to Ribble, um, they emailed me and were like, "Oh, you've not got a contract next year. Like, are you going to hand in your form of retirement sort of thing? You have to submit an official form to say I'm retiring." And I'm sort of there like, well, I don't really know what I'm going to do. I don't know. Like, yeah, maybe. So I'd sort of almost got to the point where I'd penciled it all out, I'd written it all in, and I was waiting till like the last. I was waiting till like 11:59 on the day before I have to submit it, sort of thing. But luckily something had always come up, whether it be the Ribble or the Swift thing. Something always came up. But yeah, I was the concept of retirement to me came so much closer than I think it than people maybe realize. And it was a lot of time. It was other people that actually sort of said, "Oh, you can't. You've got to keep going." Dan Lloyd I met him at a Rainer dinner one year, and he was like, "You can't stop. You know, this has got to. You can't let it stop now. You know, the cycling industry has its fluctuations, as I think the UK is witnessing now. Is
Yeah, it's a cyclical thing, isn't it?
yeah, the irony of it being cyclical. Yeah, yeah, it is a very strange. It has it sort of breathes, doesn't it? It's like a living entity. The industry it has its own, and we don't. I think we like to think we control it, don't we? And like we say, we think that we invest in it and make it better.
You just swept along in it.
Yeah,
You just have to
yeah,
make your own sense of it, really. Yeah, as individuals, you can't. None of us can individually dictate it, apart from doing the best you can within what you manage
exactly.
to do. You know, so you get swept along, but also on the understanding that hopefully after a couple of bad years, it will pick up again. It's like
Yeah,
anything, and having faith in that, and having faith that you all, as long as you know that you can do the best that you can within that, then you're going to be okay.
I think the only way is I almost see it as like it's in like investing in shares, isn't it? It's like investing in stocks. Is you want to get in there when the price is low and you want to sell out when the price is high. It's almost like that. We don't know which way the cycling industry is going to go. Nobody anticipated the pandemic, and nobody anticipated that it was going to fall off, and nobody anticipated maybe that 10 years ago in the UK you could ride for NFTO or Madison or whoever. You could take your pick, and you could literally live, and you could
Yeah.
go to teams, and
We
was
we had
even,
7 Conti teams
yeah,
in the UK in about the time that you were talking about in those Swift kind of years. Oh no, maybe just before 2018. Actually, when you
before,
were at Lotto, we had
yeah,
7 Conti teams because there was a big competition to get into the Tour of Britain. So and
exactly,
one
yeah.
couldn't ride it. Now it's the complete opposite.
And
But
you
mate,
think people used to bid teams against each other to try and like, oh yeah, I want a bit more money. All right, you think you wouldn't do that now, would you? You
it's
sign the
completely
contract you
different, mate.
get.
It's completely different. Well, James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Just one last question. What are you, without divulging where you're off to next year? What is going to be your big aim for next year? Is it back to the tour? Hopefully, whoever you're ever going to be riding with.
Um, oh yeah, I'm not moving.
All right. Okay.
That's the secret out of the bag. No,
Right.
I'll be staying here.
Well,
Is
that's okay. You heard it here
it,
first. Brilliant.
yeah. Is it seemed like the only thing to do really. Is there are other things there was other things on the table, but um I don't think it's. I think I'm stuck here now for a few years now. I like to think. But that's yet to be discussed. I think there's now my obviously, like I say, my career ambition personally is set. But there's obviously a path to get there, and trying to find the best way to get to from A to B. I think maybe isn't it? There's the idea of winning at the tour is obviously a ridiculously hard thing to do, isn't it? It's not. It's something that's like to try and do that and to even contemplate the idea of winning there is just ridiculous. Um, but on the way, you've got to have a few other victories on the way to sort of try and make it into the steps. And
Yeah.
obviously, trying to work out what those steps are in between. Do I try and go and um, do Giro and Vuelta in a year and then go to again to the Tour the following year? Is it better I do a Vuelta? That'll still be my legs for the following year. It's all sort of trying to work that out really, all within sort of what can be done. Um, how many days I'm allowed outside the UK, this kind of stuff. How many training camps? At the minute, it's a bit of a Rubik's cube of a.
It's an exciting Rubik's cube, though, isn't it? If Rubik's cubes can be exciting, when you think back to those like 2019 and 2021, when things were kind of on the bleak side,
Yeah,
here you are now, staying with a team that have taken you to 2 Grand Tours now, and you
yeah,
know, and now you've got this renewed, not that you didn't ever have belief in yourself, but renewed confidence in yourself. It's an
yeah,
exciting, isn't it? It's an exciting time to be James Shaw, I think, mate. And it's really lovely because I've seen your struggles, but I've seen that this never say die attitude, mate, has got you, and physical ability. You're blessed with that, but to unlock that, you've got to really
mm,
believe in yourself, and that's what you've been able to do. So,
yeah,
I'm happy for you, mate. And a lot of people are, so it's brilliant to
yeah.
see.
Yeah, no, like I say, I think over the past couple of years, it's been all too easy to have that sort of confidence beaten out of you, um, sort of thing. So yeah, I feel like I've found a bit more belief in myself. I've got more motivation than ever now. So
that's
just to change my life. I've got the opportunity to change my life now, haven't I? So
you
if I
have.
don't take it, if I don't take it, it's can only be my fault at the end of the day. And
Well, I
I'd
think
like to get to the end of my career and be like, all right, did everything I could. But yeah, the rest were better. So yeah, it's
brilliant stuff, mate.
interesting.
Well, it's actually ended up being 52-minute chat, mate, rather than the half an hour allotted. So apologies for that, but it's been a lovely chat. Quite a philosophical one, actually. I didn't quite
Yeah.
expect it to take those sorts of turns. But James, it's been an absolute pleasure. You better get out on your bike.
Mm.
And I shall leave it to it. And let's catch up sooner rather than later. Let's go for a nice cafe run in the winter at some point.
Yeah, we'll do something. We'll get a ride together.
Definitely. Cheers, mate.
Cool. Cheers.